Welcome to Mastering Life's Adventures, an educational podcast about tapping into your true self, the soul, your soul, the substance of your life, to discover what life's ups and downs are really about, and how to have a greater sense of purpose, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I am Dr. Judith Holder, your host, coach, psychologist, fellow seeker who enjoys diving into the connections between spirituality, psychology, wellness, and your everyday life's adventures. All preparing and polishing you like the facets of a magnificent diamond to be your best self. If you're craving more from your life, you are in the right place. Come, let's journey together and transforming what you know into who you really are. Mastering Life's Adventures begins now.
Hi, I'm back to talk about part 2 of Forgetfulness. This is diving a little bit deeper into forgetfulness. This is diving a little bit deeper into forgetfulness because I think it is a key variable of why we don't make progress on our spiritual path. And I think sometimes we end up thinking that it's just a part of living and a part of life and a part of what happens on a day-to-day because we're so busy, as I mentioned in part 1, that we have so many things that we're trying to get done and it's forgetful. And I know it happens to me, but I also have to stop and be able to say, why is this showing up now? Why is this forgetfulness that I forgot to do A, B? Why? Well, then it moves you into having to think about and reevaluate how you're living your particular life, day, event, whatever is happening to you. Yes, it's part of the human condition to be forgetful, but when it's a chronic thing and a person says to you, I forgot again, or I didn't remember that again, or, this is the 5th time that has happened to me, then it's time for you to look at that and what impact it has on your soul development, your soul evolution. The soul, it feels as if already it's been forgotten. That most of us don't even think we have a soul. Or we think that our soul is somewhere out there, outside of ourselves. But our soul is all within us. It is our intuition. It is the energy by which we live. It is a special spirit spark that's been given to us from God, our Creator, I am presence, that's been given to us in order to live life here on planet Earth. But we all have a mission. We all have a purpose. We all have a particular direction that we need to move in. And we all have choices that need to be made. And so that means that it is so easy, I guess the word I'm trying to think about, is to live life as it is. On the surface, whatever comes my way, I deal with it. I handle it. I, do whatever I need to do to get through that particular day. I have a family, so I have to take care of them. I have some special events that happen to me, so I have to tend them. I have some expectations of me at work, so I try to meet those expectations. But is that all there is to life? Are we forgetting that our soul is here for a purpose? And do we take some still time in order to think about what that might be? And still the staying tuned to light and love? Staying tuned to there's a vibration that we all want to be in the frequency of, that lifts us, or a vibration that pulls us down. Forgetfulness pulls us down. Forgetfulness moves us into missing out on our time cycles or important things for us to do. There's some things that only happen once. For example, your child walking, and the beginning steps of walking only happens at a certain age. Then that child is running and moving on to the next stage, but we miss that. You can all think about what things that only happen once. It's like you only go this way once. So how do we take advantage of the time that we do have and use it wisely? Because that's the thing that happens sometimes is we're not using our time very wisely. We're kind of focused more on having a good meal, or focused more on finding a good channel to watch, or more focused around having some social interactions with individuals. But we're forgetting our soul. We're forgetting that our soul has a mission. And our soul wants us to remember that mission, or to ask about, what is the mission of my reason for being here and now? What is my reason for being in this family? What is my reason for having this particular job that I have that's now frustrating or annoying to me? But we forget that there may be certain lessons that the soul needs to learn, that the soul needs to be aware of and start to change. But what happens, and something I talked about in the past episode, is our ego, or the ego persona, gets in the way. And it just wants competitiveness. It just wants to be right. It just wants to make sure it's showing up in the most positive light. Even though it may be in situations you can be the emperor with no clothes, everyone can see through you, but you can't see through you because you haven't taken the time to ask your soul, what is it that we need to do in this situation? How do we need to operate in a different way when we know how we've been doing is not helpful to us nor to our soul progress? One of the keys, since we're talking about this key of forgetfulness, is to be aware of the fact that your soul is asking of you to remember. Remember your reason for being. Remember that you are greater, that spirit spark that exists within you is far greater than the ego, far greater than the hurts and pains and difficulties. Do we need to heal from them? Yes. There have been, challenging traumas that have happened to us, and getting the appropriate professional support to do that. But our soul, and this hunger of the soul, is asking us to remember our reason for being. And that means we have to have not only still time, but we have to be intentional in our living. Intentional about, okay, I don't know much about my soul. How may I learn about my soul? There's much information on the internet about the soul and the soul striving. You can listen to some of my podcasts that talk about the soul. There are many other things that are out there that can help you to begin attuning to, what is my soul about? What is it that I'm trying to learn? And what happens with forgetfulness is we become like, what was that movie in which the Groundhog's Day? We keep on repeating the same thing again and again and again and again because we forget. And we live, I sometimes say, on a planet of forgetfulness, not realizing the spiritual essence of who we are, the greatness of who we are, because we have that spirit spark of God that exists within us. When we're on this wheel of forgetfulness, or Groundhog's Day, and you can look at that movie, it's a great movie to look at, that goes and talks about how this person continues to have to repeat until they start to begin to remember, oh, this happened to me before. What do I want to do about it now? That's what we have to get the intentional striving around. When we see certain themes that are happening to us, again and again and again, we need to connect the dots, as opposed to, it just happened, I'll get through it, I'll move on to the next. But the process of living and being mindful and remembering is, let me see the bigger picture. Let me see the higher picture. Let me ask of my spiritual self, the I Am Presence, the Creator, the Atman, about what is it that I need to get more in tune to? How do I need to pass this particular situation, which I call spiritual test, that are spiritual lessons that are being given to us. And we have to be willing to say, what is this lesson? What is this task? What is this thing that is before me? And how do I want to pass this test in the highest way, in the most gracious way, in the most thoughtful way that honors my soul and honors my spiritual essence of who I really am. But because the soul is on the path of uniting with the Christ-like qualities that Jesus showed us and how to be. How to be stern with ourselves and also kind, not only to ourselves, but kind to others, but with sometimes a firmness to that. That we do not need to be gullible, but we do need to be truthful, which I talked about in the past episode on forgetfulness. So we do need to make sure we are willing to be humble and look at things and clear our path. Clear those things that have been emotionally painful or difficult for us. Find a mechanism by which we come to terms to those things. Because the more clutter we have within ourselves, the more forgetfulness that we can become, or the more forgetting that we can become. And we do not want to live a life of half luster, of the luster and the beauty and the glory and the victory of God comes to clarity of mind, clarity of our emotions, clarity to know that we are here for a greater purpose. And how are we fulfilling that greater purpose on a day-to-day basis? That's what we're trying to do. Forgetfulness is a big area that happens. And one of the stats I said in the last episode was 30% of people can be forgetful. I think that number's higher, but in general. And for globally, that's 2.4 billion people. And if 2.4 billion people on this planet became into remembering, having clarity of mind, clarity of purpose, understanding the soul and the soul's essence, wow, wouldn't that be pretty amazing and pretty helpful in the service of our soul? So let me talk a little bit more about the soul. In one episode, I talked about the four stages of the soul, which you can go back and listen to, and I'll put that also down below in the comment section or in the description section. But with these 4 dimensions of soul, our soul, and many sometimes we are unaware of it because the ego persona is so strong, it goes dormant. It goes to sleep. And when it goes to sleep, it creates this kind of void. And so the ego part of our nature is always trying to fill ourselves with something. Fill ourselves with food, or fill ourselves with material things, clothing, or looking beautiful, which nothing the matter with that. I think looking beautiful is great. But we're trying to fill this void with things. But what is really wanting, and you have to awaken, is your soul, the substance of your life. Your soul, which gives you greater meaning and purpose and direction. And so what happens with our youth is that no one is helping them to be aware of their soul and the substance of the essence of who they are and the greatness of who they are. So they end up walking the path of the mundane, of the day-to-day, and thinking that materialism and getting more money or getting a house or getting, for those that are older youth, of 28, for example, or 33, that is going to fill this void that exists within me, within that particular individual. And when I talk about youth, I think about it youth from the age of their teens up into 33. That we're still in our youth, learning about ourselves, growing about ourselves. It doesn't mean that we can't have that happen all throughout our lives. But that is when, during that particular time frame of 20s and up in the early 30s, we're thinking about marriage, and we're thinking about careers, and we're thinking about what our next steps are going to be. But for the most part, we don't think about those things with our soul and mind. we're thinking about it from the ego persona of getting ahead, achieving, making sure that our physical needs are being met. That's fine. But what I'm saying, in a parallel way, we also need to be able to ask, be aware, be guided by our soul. And many times we end up forgetting our soul. It wants to get into the car too. It wants to get on the bus too and ride with you, but it's left behind. But what can we do about that? Well, first and foremost, we need to, for example, when we wake up in the morning, we need to check in with ourselves. We need to ask ourselves, so how am I feeling today? How are you doing, soul? How may I get more in tune with you? How can I be aware of your promptings that occur within me, that I need to do something and maybe not do something else? So it's like you're in listening grace to your soul and seeing where it drives. And you may say, well, I don't hear anything from my soul. Well, you may not, because you haven't gotten into the practice of asking your soul to reveal itself, because it's asleep, it's dormant. When I talked about those stages, we want to move into more having an engaged, active soul interaction. That only is going to happen when we start to take the space and the time and begin to ask and begin to love the essence of who we are. And that's the second thing. The essence of who we are is God-like, not human-like. The essence, the spirit spark, which I talk about in my first book on Mastering Life's Adventures, on the beam, is that spirit spark that exists within us, that's a part of God, and will return to God. That's the path of the soul. The soul knows that it needs to have certain experiences and has to engage in certain behaviors and thoughts and feelings in order for it to come into alignment with the spiritual universal principles of what God is, not man, and the man-made laws, which I talked about in another podcast, which you can go back and listen to, and I'll try to put that one below as well. Now, the other aspect about the soul is the soul needs to be able to get into Christ's discernment, wisdom, knowing what is the right direction to move in. And that comes through prayer. Prayer, reading the Bible, reading spiritual nature, reading that gives you a glimmer into how to make right choices in the things that you do. So that does require some attunement with yourself and your higher soul self, the soul self, the Christic light, or the Christ principles. The other aspect that is helpful for you to do as you're trying to move toward more of an active and engaged soul is joy. Being joyful, being happy. That's what the soul wants, us to be joyful. It doesn't mean we don't be serious when we need to be serious, but we don't take ourselves so seriously 24/7 that it ends up being that it puts a straitjacket on the soul. I'm not sure if you've ever heard this saying, but the joy is the motor of life. Joy is the motor of life. It helps us or propels us forward because we're joyful, we're happy, we're content. We are willing to laugh at ourselves and laugh at situations that are truthfully and funny, but not at someone else's expense. But we're willing to find some joy, and whatever we find ourselves in a situation, well, where's that silver lining? Where is it that what is it I can take away? So it does require overall a mind shift. Shifting our mind from the lower vibration of the human personality, the ego, and all that involves, and the forgetfulness that takes place. It's easy to take place for the ego because the ego doesn't mind being busy. And if it forgets, okay, it forgets. Well, that's just the way it is. Or I just had a bad memory. That's not. We're moving from that direction up to a higher level. And that higher level is being intentional in these qualities I just mentioned, and also I'm intentional in looking at our mindset and looking at it from the Christic soul mindset. What would Christ do in this situation? What is my soul prompting me to do here? How can I learn from these experiences to fine-tune myself? Those are all good things to do that allows us to move on the path and the higher path of the soul and move away from forgetfulness and allow us to have the clarity of mind, clarity of heart, to be always in attunement and in step with what we need to learn, what we need to learn to grow. And in that growing process, we are now on the right path to a higher awareness of who we really are and not move into forgetfulness. It's like the old analogy about the eagle who was raised with chickens, which I think I mentioned at one point in one episode, but it's always a great analogy. And it was about the eagle thought it was a chicken. And so in the process of thinking it's chicken, it didn't know it could fly. There was only another eagle who saw the eagle in the chicken coop that said, swooped down and said, "Why are you here? Why are you here?" He goes, "What do you mean, why am I here?" And the eagle said, "Well, you're an eagle. You're not a chicken." He says, "Well, these are my friends. I raised with them, and I'm doing the things they do." The eagle said, "But you're far more than the chickens. You can do so much more than the chickens." He goes, "No, I'm fine with where I'm at. This is good. This is comfortable." And that's the other thing that we have to be aware of. When we get too comfortable, that we're not willing to challenge ourselves or stretch ourselves, then we need to look at that, because life is for growing. So the eagle says, "Come with me." He says, "Why?" He says, "Just come with me. I'm going to show you something about yourself." And so the eagle did come with his other eagle, went up the mountain, and just said to the eagle who was in the chicken coop, "You can fly." And the eagle said, "No, I can't. I don't know how to fly." He says, "It's innately within you. You can fly." He says, "I don't know why you're saying that, because I don't know how to fly." So after going back and forth, the eagle said, "Jump off the cliff and fly." And the eagle pushed the other eagle, and he says, "Now flap your wings. Fly, flap your wings." And the eagle who was out there was so scared, and he says, "I'll flap my wings." Start flapping his wings harder and harder. And he said, "Oh my God, I can fly. Oh my God, I can fly. Oh my God, I can see with crystal clarity things on the ground. Wow." And so the other eagle came up alongside it and says, "Yes, you can fly. This is who you truly are." Now, think about that as applies to your soul and moving away from being forgetful into getting the knowledge, the wisdom of who you really are. You're an eagle. You can fly. And each of these are helping you understand how you can be able to fly to a greater understanding about who you really are. Something to think about. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining me for this episode on Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I would be delighted if you would share this episode with others, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe to my Mastering Life's Adventures podcast. Look forward to your joining the next episode. Please leave any comments or suggestions you might have below. Bye for now.